Book review on video. This time, Skumringstimen by Johan Theorin. Translated into English, published under the title Echoes from the Dead. It was published in 2007. The Norwegian edition is from 2008. This is an audio version, brilliantly read by Victoria Svensson, whom I'd never heard about before I picked up this audiobook, but who did a fantastic job. I'll definitely be on the lookout for more books read by her because she did an absolutely wonderful job reading this book. I loved her performance, it was absolutely wonderful. And the book itself, wow, 2 thumbs up, a wonderful, wonderful read. It was fantastic, it was gripping, it was convincing, it was a mystery, it was a historical thriller in some way. Absolutely moving, and so many qualities in this book, I can hardly enumerate them. The plot is that 20 years ago, the book is set as Öland, which is one of the islands off the coast of Sweden. And 20 years ago, on this island, a little boy disappeared. He was 6 years old. He was visiting with his mother, his grandparents, who live on the island. His mother went to the mainland for the day. His grandfather went out to do some chores. His grandmother took a nap. He left the house. There was a heavy fog that day. He walked out into the fog. He disappeared. He was never seen again. The parents' relationship broke up. His mother and father, they couldn't manage to stay together after this. And his mother, she was a student at the time, going to become a nurse. She did finish nursing school, but when the book opens, she hasn't worked for quite a long time because she is absolutely crippled by her depression, which of course is brought on by the loss of her son. Made worse by the fact that even though so many people looked, the police, volunteers, everyone combed the island, he was never found. So she has no idea what happened, and that it makes it impossible for her to really cope with her grief because she can never let go, and she knows how old he would be in his late 20s, so she always imagines, because of course she hopes deep down that he isn't really dead. And she imagines that every man in the right age that she meets could maybe be her son, and if so, what is he like? And she just hasn't been able to move on with her life at all. Her mother has died, and her father, the boy's grandfather, he's in an old folks home, but he's still, although he's physically not the man he once was, he is still a very sharp old guy. And he suddenly calls her up, pretty much out of the blue. Their contact hasn't been what it was because she in some way can't stop herself from blaming him for what happened, because if only he hadn't left the house, And she also blames herself. She blames everyone for the child's disappearance. But suddenly her father calls her, saying that he's got something weird in the mail. It's something that he thinks is in fact his grandson's shoe that he was wearing when he disappeared. And she has to come to the island and look at this, and he has things that he needs to talk to her about. And she is doubtful, but she goes. When she gets there, she discovers that her father and some of his old friends are developing a theory, more or less, about this disappearance, that she at first dismisses as being crazy, but she gets sucked into it. Her father has called her to the island because he needs help, basically investigating his theory because he's old. He has Sjogren's syndrome, which of course leads to a lot of pain. He can't walk except with a cane, and he needs someone to do the legwork, basically. So Julia, that's the mother, she goes to the island, she starts helping him out, and she starts thinking maybe there's something to this, and even if there isn't, she has to dig in it because maybe she will find out what happened to her precious boy, who, goes without saying, was her only child. There's a policeman on the island, or there are several, but he's the local cop. He starts to help her out. He isn't convinced either, but there's a bit of a thing between them, so there's also like a hint of romance, but it doesn't ruin anything. It doesn't seem tacked on, it just seems a very natural progression. And the theory basically is to do with the fact that there was a guy who was from the island who was the kind of guy who everyone always thought of when something bad happened. And not without reason. Like if someone got hurt, if something got stolen, bad things seem to just gather around this guy. He died or disappeared or whatever he did years ago, like a decade before this little boy disappeared. But somehow Julia's father still thinks that this man may have been involved. And that's the theory that he wants her to work on. And he's also digging around asking questions and, well, upsetting people, basically. And what's so clever about the book is that it's told on two levels. One is the present day story with Julia, her father, and their relationship, which is also beautifully portrayed in the book. But some flashbacks also, which are Julia's memories. Julia. Her memories of the day and of events after the disappearance. And then there's another level which is in the past, beginning in the 1930s, which is the life story of this bad guy, Nils, from when he is a child, and takes you through what happened. And in the present day part of the story, you get sort of their take on it, and you get to hear what they know of what happened. And the current islanders, or the old guys who were more or less contemporaries in this, but who didn't necessarily know him, but who are aware of what's been going on. And you get pieces of the puzzle there, and then increasingly you get more and more of his story as it unfolds, because that's being told in a separate narrative. And I have to say, I was so impressed with this author, because he, Nils, is originally presented, to start with, as just a total bad guy. Like, scum of the earth. He's a rich kid, son of one of the really domineering families on the island, and he basically thinks the world is his oyster, he can do what he wants. And he seems to be like a budding psychopath. And you're prepared, as soon as you start hearing about him, that you're so not gonna like this guy. 'Cause there's something wrong with him, and he's done all these bad things. And you don't want to like him, but as his story unfolds, he becomes more and more multifaceted. You see more and more of his story, and you learn about his personality, and I just ended up with so much sympathy for him, even though, yeah, he is the bad guy. But there are other bad guys too. In fact, aren't we all a little bad? Aren't we all a bit to blame? And things aren't necessarily what they seem, even in a small and transparent community, like on this island. And I just think what he's done here, the plot is fascinating. And the way he tells it with the double narrative is very skillfully done, and then with the characterization, it's just deeply impressive what he manages to do with several of these characters, but especially with Nils, the bad guy that he set up to be. Absolutely fascinating. This is the first in a series of 4, or it's going to be a series of 4. Only 2 have been written so far, but he wants to write a series of 4 books, 1 for each season. This is fall. All set at Öland, where the author comes from himself, of course. And I just cannot recommend this enough. Echoes from the Dead, as I said, is an English title. I think it's about 470, 490 pages in the English edition. This audiobook was 13 hours. It's kind of a break, but it's so worth it. It was just a fascinating read. I was deeply impressed with this author. This is his debut novel. And I can hardly praise it enough. I am so glad that I read it. I will definitely be reading the other books, and I'm going to recommend this to everyone. It's a novel. It's not just a mystery. It's not just a thriller. It's a historical novel as well. It's a psychological thriller. It's a story about a suffering woman who's lost her child. It's a story about a father and a daughter finding their way back to each other. It's a story about people who are struggling with who they are and with the situations they find themselves in. I love this book. I really loved it. It was a fantastic read that I think now that I have the audiobook, so to speak, No copying, but there we go. I think I'm probably going to be reading this book again because this really was an absolutely fascinating story, brilliantly done by a young debuting author. Highly recommended. Echoes of the Dead by Johan Theorin.